So, but daily mental practice at the USTA looks like this three sort of stage thing. We try to build our mental training around the day, meaning that if there's structure, there's schedule, there's routine, the players will engage in their mental skills that will help them be at ease, manage their stress, manage their emotions, be confident, be committed, be goal focused, all these good things. But what we talk about is you should have a mental warm up before you do your physical warm up.
Welcome to our Sport Fuels Life podcast, where we're bringing you interviews with coaches and athletes at the top of their game.
This is a community to support coaches, athletes, and fans who share a passion for making the world a better place through athletics.
We're your hosts. I'm Megan.
And I'm Scott.
Welcome to
Sport
Sport
Fuels
Fuels Life. Well, today on the Sport Fuels Life podcast, we are here with Dr. Larry Lauer. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, us too. Well, I guess let's go ahead and dive in here. This is your first time on the show, and we'd love to give just a little bit of background for our listeners. We know that you are the director of USTA player development and
mental performance at USTA.
mental performance. That's right. Yes. And then, so if you could just maybe share how you got started in the world of tennis and maybe just give us a little background about your story.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say I'm a tennis lifer like a lot of my coworkers and teammates who've been in tennis all their lives. I started out, in rural Pennsylvania playing all sports and played tennis in the summer uh, when the weather was good enough and the opportunity was there. So, I would say I was good at a lot of sports. Not, I didn't master any of them. I didn't specialize. That wasn't the thing in rural Pennsylvania back in the day. So, um, jumped into coaching baseball when I was young. I really enjoyed coaching, and through that, going to Clarion University, just started really getting interested in the world of sports psychology because of a professor that I knew, Dr. Eastley Krause at Clarion University, brought my attention to all these things that interested me in the world of psychology and sport, and that I didn't have answers for. I didn't understand why you could go 3 for 4 on Saturday and on Sunday go 0 for 4 and strike out 3 times. What's going on there? Why is there that inconsistency? What changed? I know I can hit the ball. Why am I making 2 errors one day and have no confidence in the field? So these kinds of questions were kind of burning within me trying to figure it out. And I took a special course at Clarion on sports psychology and learned a lot. I really enjoyed it, but it opened up more questions for me. So through my undergraduate, spending time with Dr. Krause and studying psychology, I really got the opportunity to meet some great folks and move on to University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Dr. Dan Gould was at the time and running a lab, applied sports psychology lab at the time, and just had a great experience with Dan. We're still very close, still do work together, but he's a great mentor and kind of showed me the ropes. And as I was getting the theory and the research from my courses, I was doing a lot of research work with him in applied ways, and then also working with teams and individual athletes. And at that time, though, this is where the whole tennis thing starts to really take off. I'm playing a lot of tennis. I'm coaching tennis at the university. I'm not coaching. I'm teaching tennis class. I got to get that straight uh, at the university. But we were doing research with the USTA at the time, studying why tennis coaches weren't using the sports psychology information that existed. There was all these books that were out there in the 90s, but coaches really didn't feel like they could take the knowledge from the books and apply it to the coaching. One of the things we learned was it just wasn't practical enough and it wasn't clear enough on how to apply some of these concepts. So we ended up creating a report on basically mental skills and drills and how to teach them. And that turned into a book, which is now the USTA Mental Skills and Drills Handbook that we have published through Coach's Choice, and it's still out there. It's been dated now, 2010, but there's a lot of really good information in there for coaches on how to teach the mental game on court and off court. But that was just the beginning of the journey, and then I started uh, doing some presentations for the USTA. We then followed up with some more research, studying the journeys and the paths of these pro players and their role of their parents. And this was during my PhD at UNC Greensboro. So through that, I started meeting a lot of coaches at the USTA and spending time with them, meeting some players. I was doing a lot of private work as well in tennis. Um, so I had getting quite a bit of tennis experience, spending a lot of time in the tennis world, and doing coach education opportunities, and running my own business as well, consulting business. And then, at that point, as I'm finishing up my PhD, we had moved to Michigan State University, Dan and I, and he was running the Institute for the Study of Youth Sports, and I was doing the work on the coaching side, coaching education, um, continuing my personal consulting business as well. But the USTA player development, for the first time, decided to create a full-time position for a mental skills specialist, and I was fortunate enough to be able to get that job and move to Boca. At the time, we're to Everett Tennis Academy, and join player development, which was relatively young at that point in terms of bringing players in, having them stay on site, and training them for weeks at a time. But that was in 2013, and 11 years later, I'm now still there and moved to Orlando, and things have evolved and grown and changed. But yeah, it's been an exciting ride. 11 years in now, I think we've built a pretty good network of coaches who understand the mental game, who are very good at teaching the mental game. We can always get better, but they're equipped with more knowledge than ever. And we're super excited that anytime we get a chance, myself and my team, to get out and just talk about the psychology of performance and how it relates to tennis or any sport. So.
Yeah, a lot of great intel there into the story, and I love. I was actually a tennis instructor of a class as well at Indiana University when I was doing my graduate work there, so I can relate. Did played a little bit of tennis, but we're both pole vaulters. We're both professional pole vaulters. Just competed at the Olympic trials this past summer, and so a lot of individual events per se in baseball. As you're talking, I'm assuming the pitchers and the hitters are the records you're looking at, and then tennis players, unless they're playing doubles, are almost always alone. Pole vaulters usually alone as well, and there's a different dynamic when it comes to team sports as it does individuals. And let's dive in, I guess, a little bit to you know the athlete, the coach, and the role of the parents was something that you keyed in a lot that I really enjoyed. Learning sports psychology, helping people implement these ideas that you've created and pathways to success, but then all of the people that are involved in an athlete's success are more important than just the individual. So we talk a lot about the individual, how they can think, but explain to me, I guess, a little bit when you realize that teaching coaches how to teach athletes and also the role of parents, what are some of the differences in the coaches and the parents help on the athletes with sports psych?
Yeah, for sure. This was a point of emphasis when I arrived at UNC Greensboro. It was very clear working with Dr. Gould that coaches were essential to this whole process of developing young athletes and players, and through that, learning a lot of how to interact with coaches, and our role as mental coaches or researchers or scientists, how we can help them, but also how they can teach us a lot in return as well. We can learn a lot, and I think that's one of the things I've tried to do over the years is learn from the coaches I've been around, because there's just a ton of knowledge that you pick up from listening to them, observing them, talking with them, and so that's always been something that I really tried to emphasize in my work, and I learned early on with Dr. Gould. But coaches are the point of interaction with their athletes. This is where it all begins, right? And they spend the most time with the athletes, if you think about it, in their sport development, and they have the most influence. coaches are often the most important people outside of their parents in the lives of young athletes. They become very important authority figures, uh, even friends over time. So the coaches have a lot of influence and can make a huge difference in the lives of young people, as you know, as I'm sure you've experienced with coaches as well. And so it's important to bring the coaches into the fold of what you're trying to do. I have talked with colleagues about this at times. They're like, yeah, we just focus directly on the athletes, but I think you're missing quite a bit if you're not communicating with the coaches, if you're not working with the coaches. And I understand we deal with issues of confidentiality when it comes to working with clients and players. But if we can work through some of that and make it more of a team effort where there is consent to share certain information, it really expedites the development of the young person because now the coach is involved getting on board. What you see if you don't involve the coach, that person may actually be working in conflict with what you're teaching the athlete, in giving messages that confuse or counter what you're trying to do. And as a mental coach, your influence is limited. You don't get a lot of time with players and athletes. When you do, you really have to have great engagement and capitalize on the opportunity. And one of those ways is to involve the coach. And through that and understanding that, there's a lot of research that needed to happen on coaches, how they coach, how they communicate, how they lead. That was a lot of our work at UNC Greensboro, was looking at the coaches. We did a study where we looked at some of the best high school football coaches across the country and just ways that they develop life skills and character in young people. It was a great research project that taught me a lot, and spending time with those coaches and listening to them. So, you know, coaches again are the main point of interaction, and in the world of sports psychology, we really need to be working with and collaborating with the coaches to maximize what we can do for the athletes, but also to develop those coaches. I think there's a whole world now of coach development that's occurring. If you look at different organizations, including the United States Center for Coaching Excellence, there's a whole world here now. We're putting staff in place to support the coaches because they're performers too, and so we need to research them, their best practices, the way to do things. We need to support them. We need to challenge them. Expect a lot, but also support a lot. So I'm not sure if that answers the question, but that's sort of my beliefs around coaches.
Yeah, and that kind of brings up another point. So you mentioned that there's now support groups for coaches, and I think that only uh, provides the importance that coaches play in a role. When you have a whole support system built around coaches, it truly shares the impact that they have on the athletes. How have you seen sports psychology change over the years? It seems like there's now so many resources, and maybe there weren't in the past. And with these new resources, how have you seen coaches' styles change? Because you mentioned that some of the best coaches, they focus on developing character and life skills. Sometimes when you think about a good coach, maybe I think of like a more old school coach that might be very strict. And so I guess if you could, I guess kind of a 2-point question, just maybe talk about how sports psych has changed and the importance of that, and maybe the impact that has had on the different coaching styles that we see today.
Sure. Sports psychology as a field has grown a lot. There's a lot more interest. There's a lot more media attention. There's a lot more professionals in the field, especially I can speak to North America. Conferences you go to now, instead of having 300 people, you have 1,000 people. You have lots of students who are looking to get into the field. So, it's growing. It's still, what you would say maybe like in its adolescent stage, where it's still figuring itself out in some ways and how we support the greater kind of sport industry. But so what we've seen is an influx of young professionals into the field. At the same time, we've seen this explosion of social media and access to information, which is giving young, all sports psychology professionals a greater world that they can communicate with. So young athletes, parents, coaches have way more information that they can find quite easily. And then you have way more research and theory that's occurred over the years. It's probably, really helped us become a little bit more, say, refined in our approach in sport and how we do things. And you have these sort of factors coming together at the same time. The athletes have started speaking out about their experiences, right? About their well-being, the coaches that are working with them. So all this is happening around the same time and influencing each other, right? It's all kind of feeding off of one another. And so what you get is, in my opinion, way more access to sports psychology information. We have, a growing field with even better, probably theories and research. We got a long ways to go there, but it's improved. And at the same time, you have a lot of noise, as you know, out there. And it can be tough for parents, coaches, players to sift through what's good and what's just sort of mediocre or canned responses. So, I think it puts more responsibility on the consumer, unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at that, to make informed decisions about uh, what's quality and what's not. And the field needs to do a better job of informing consumers of what is quality and what is not. And that includes who are quality practitioners and also what's quality information, what can you trust. And that's a place that needs to go. But to me, because of this, it's opened, I think, players' eyes to, wow, you know what? Like, I can try to excel in my sport and I don't have to make these decisions that are unhealthy for me. I think there's been a lot of good that has come from athletes speaking up, uh, things like the Players Journal and things like that, that they're sharing their stories has been huge. Even in my work, with players, I've seen the stigma come down quite a bit in working with a mental coach, just working on mental performance, for example. Where in the past, don't tell anybody we're meeting. It's like they're starting to tell other people. They're coming up to them and saying, "Hey, I'm working with a mental coach. That person's really helping me. You should call them." So it's changed. Now there are still players who don't feel very comfortable with sharing. That's totally fine. It's their prerogative. But that this whole thing has changed where young people become way more, in my world anyway, in tennis, they have become more comfortable with the idea of having a mental coach. Now, we've also tried to set that stage because what we do at USTA Player Development is if you come into former national training centers, you are going to engage with a mental coach when you're young. So if you're a 13-year-old tennis player and you're coming to the national campus in Orlando and you're in for a training week, most likely you're going to have time with a mental coach. Maybe it's in a group setting, most likely, but you are going to engage with one and then you're going to see them quite often in practice. So it's not like you see him for an hour and then this person that kind of lives up in this office and we're going to practices, we're seeing in the gym, we're checking in on them. So we try to create a relationship, create a presence around that's not just the tennis coaches, you have mental coaches, you have strength coaches, you have this other personnel that are there to support you. So things have changed a lot for sure. But it's provided a lot more opportunity for really all the stakeholders, including us mental coaches and sports psychologists. So
Yeah, I think you highlighted a lot there in that answer in a really good way. Yeah, the development of both coaches from the older generations, where it's like there was a lot of power in the coach. There still is a lot of influence, but the what the coaches said was law, and athletes weren't allowed to speak out and say, "Oh, I'm having a bad experience." So the idea of like winning is the only thing that matters, we started to see athletes fall through the cracks. And yeah, not to take this to a negative way, but we've had a lot more of mental issues going towards suicide in athletes recently in the last 10 years. And so now there's a lot more conversations going on. Hey, what's going on? There's a lot of pressure. It seems like we have to have these conversations to make sure that people feel loved and cared about regardless of their athletic achievements. And that's something that's kind of really special because now athletes feel that they have the platform, as you mentioned, and
Right.
they should want to seek help if they're worried about pressure. But then coaches as well, now coaches, they are being held accountable maybe if they're not treating people more than just a result.
Yeah,
And
that I didn't really answer the second part of that second part question. That's good you bring that up. That coaches, you can still have success in different ways as a coach, and some are going to be tougher, and some are going to be more what they call the players coach. My belief has always been that the coach needs to adjust to the level that they're coaching, and make it's got to be athlete centered first. And so if we're working with kids, there's never uh, it's not appropriate to use those harder tactics, I don't think, unless it's safety or something like that. One of the things I learned from one of those high school football coaches, that coach talked about in a research years ago, that when you get after a kid, so you're getting after them, you're giving them some pretty tough feedback, you don't make it personal. Do not make it personal. You make it about the behavior, about the performance, never about them as a person. And then what you do is by the end of practice or at the end of practice, you come back and you spend a little time with them. So if you given what we call tough love, that tough love, it doesn't end when you give that critical feedback to that person. It continues where you then follow up and let them know that you believe in them, that they can do it, that you're there to support them, that they're a great person, that just needs a little push. This is what these really good coaches were doing, that were could be tough, but had that relationship in that respect. And I think coaches make the mistake when they don't do that follow up. They let their emotions dictate their interactions, and they lose sight of the fact that this is still about the athlete and what is this doing to the athlete? How are they experiencing this coaching? And how are we going to maintain this relationship in a good place so that I can continue to coach this person? We get lose sight of that. We get emotional. Let those dictate things, become short sighted, focused on the immediate versus the long term. There's different ways to look at this, but so there's different ways to coach. But what I do think is going on is that I hope that coaches are becoming more flexible and adaptable to their athletes, right? Being able to go in and out and figure out what's the right thing to do versus I'm a hammer and everything's a nail and I'm gonna beat everybody into the approach that I want. And that just doesn't work. We know with the current generation, the generation before them.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think that both Scott and I can picture different coaches based on what you're saying. And so I'm just kind of sitting here laughing a little bit. But what I'm hearing is that coaching is so well rounded. It's not just about getting the results. It's also really about prioritizing the needs of that person as a person first. And in turn, how does that help with their results? I mean, I would think that maybe if they feel like they're in a more supported environment, maybe it also motivates them. It makes them more able to handle high pressure situations. So I guess what effect would you say that that has on the athlete?
Well, when the athlete feels supported, they can go out on that limb and take chances, take risks that are necessary to perform at a high level. I think about this brings to mind some of my work with ice hockey goaltenders, because I spent a lot of time with ice hockey as well in the past. And one of the things in my experience with those goalies was that if they felt that the coaching staff, the head coach, was likely to pull them if they gave up a poor goal. They're looking over they're looking over the bench, they're worried, they're playing with a lot of anxiety. But if they knew that coach, instead of just punishing them and pulling them out for giving up a goal, would give them a chance to bounce back, to work through it, to figure it out, then they were more focused, more motivated, even more confident because they knew that they had that support. Now, again, if players aren't performing at a high performance level, you have to pull them at some point if you're talking about a team sport. But at the same time, if that coach is showing empathy, if the coach is providing support as they're challenging that player, which they need to challenge them too, then that player is going to take more risk, is going to play with that intensity, go for it more, which is what we need, honestly. We don't need passive, tentative performers. Obviously it's going to happen, but that's not where it's enjoyable. It's not enjoyable when you're performing that way. Worried about what happens if you don't perform. And that's something as a coach developer, coach educator, I always try to express, like, you want your athletes to go out there, you're trying to reduce their doubts and their worries. And as a coach, if you're creating more doubt and worry, probably not a good thing. Now, again, there's nuances and caveats to everything. If the athlete's comfortable, that's maybe where you have to create some doubt. So there, again, you have to understand these are very contextually specific, things that we're talking about. But one thing that's not is coaches need to support their athletes while they're challenging and pushing them, so that they can go out on a limb and really do what's necessary to perform.
Yeah, performance is obviously what everybody wants to hear, and I think they get distracted by the end result versus the process. That's a common theme in sports talk, coaching, whether it's skills development, everything involved with getting better at an individual sport or team sport. Uh, Everybody sees the glory at the end of the game, the win, the championship, that scenario. But that's where sports psych really does help. It helps people, understand where they are and what's stopping them from their achievements, and then putting them back into perspective of what's important and how to get there. And it's okay if you don't get there this year or next year, but as long as you're willing to do everything it takes to have fun in the process and get better, those results will eventually come. So let's shift. You've talked to goalies, in hockey. You've talked to tennis players. You've talked to athletes all over. What are some, I guess, if you can, without naming names, two specific instances where you really helped, somebody flourish who was maybe underutilized, or didn't ever think that they were really going to be anything, and they ended up becoming more than they thought. And then what's an example of someone who was maybe doing really well, whatever level of, performance, and then started to struggle and then found their way back?
Oof, yeah, so got to go back to my memory bank now. Spent so much time with so many people over the years, which has been great. I do remember early in my time at USTA working with a pro player, and this person was really struggling, trying to make it on the pro scene and have a career, inconsistent results, and really doubting themselves about it, whether or not they could do it. And we spent a lot of time together talking about her strengths, what she could do that made her different and special, and yet at the same time the things that she was going to have to work on. Right, like, you're going to have to still earn this, and you're still going to have to keep improving. It's always about getting better every day. But there are things you have. There's natural strengths. There's things you've developed that you can maximize, that can change the story. The story becomes that I'm failing, I'm not doing good enough, I can't do this. I might have to leave this sport. And that's a tough story to wake up to every day. And changing that story was extremely important, talking about your strengths, your goals, what you're going to achieve, and how you're going to get there. Getting excited about that journey, that plan, knowing that there was going to be twists and turns, setbacks, and there were, but really staying the course. And it goes back to what you mentioned about the process and really emphasizing that over results. This is extremely important for anyone listening. How you do what you do is way more important than the outcome, because you can't really get the outcome without the process, the way you do things, the steps it takes to get to the outcome. So we tried to emphasize all those things with this person. It ended up, she was able to have a great pro career and achieve a lot, and has really grown and super resilient, because she has had setbacks, injuries, some tough things happen, but really great career, and very proud of her. And then I'll talk about a junior player. Uh, this person was one of the best players at 12 and under, one of the best, maybe the best in the country, and early developer, so had size, had strength, was able to just you know, be bigger and hit the ball bigger and beat everybody young. As the other kids caught up, it was a real struggle, because now the things that worked at 12 and 14 weren't working so well at 16. And some of this is natural development, right? Like kids catch up. What we've seen are the kids who maybe don't develop early, they have to adapt and overcome certain things. And so they become super keen in other ways, like maybe in their tactical knowledge, competitiveness, to make up for maybe they don't have height, maybe don't have a big serve yet, or big ground strokes. And so as they start to develop and become bigger and stronger and faster, those that maybe weren't earlier developers start to catch up and pass. And this is what happened to this person, and it was extremely difficult and very, very hard on that person, the person's confidence. And it's taken time, and that person finding his way, and still working through that. But you know those are challenging situations, and the bounce back doesn't always end up being what you want it to be. It might be that that person becomes a great coach, because they've experienced what they've experienced. And I think that could happen in this case, where maybe as a player they don't achieve the goals that they thought they would when they were 14, but they end up being a better coach for the person. So, um, you know, in terms of success in this kind of work, it's measured in many different ways. It could be measured as, performing, reaching the big goal, winning an ATP WTA tournament, being top 50, being top 20, and that's happened. And in those cases, is awesome. But it also can be that the person, maybe they don't reach the ranking goals, outcome goals, but they end up being a great person and someone who is helping others. And we have multiple cases of that too that I'm very proud of. And it starts with the training day, in my mind. When you show up, are you there to get better? And are you focused on the process every day of getting, can you get into that, immerse yourself with that, and learn that these, what people will call these soft things, these character things, can we elevate those to primary importance? Because if you're resilient and you're tough-minded and super professional in the way you go about things, and respectful, and just all these different things that we talk about, and you say, oh yeah, those are important. They need to be part of your training every day. If you want people to be resilient, then you have to build that into your environment. Give them opportunities to make mistakes and come back and flourish. Don't beat them down when they're not perfect or they're making mistakes. So there's things that we can do as the coaches, as the support staff, that can really emphasize the process and these character types of things, which is eventually what everybody can gain from sport. Not everybody's going to be at the Olympic trials, but everybody can be better for sport if we emphasize these character values, which, by the way, enhance performance, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I convince a lot of parents. Like, yes, we're emphasizing right now in practice them doing their between point routines. But what you understand, we're teaching them discipline. We're teaching them how to focus, how to be resilient, and all these different things that they're going to need in life. They're going to need to be able to focus themselves and believe in themselves and commit when they're doing the job. So these are the kinds of things that we need to be emphasizing while we teach the technique and the tactics of the sports.
Yeah, and I think that's something that gets lost. You think that you're just going through the motion and you're practicing and you're getting better, but until you hit a challenge where you're facing self-doubt and people are catching up to you, you're almost a little bit behind then, and you have to catch up with your mind, and that can take a lot of time. And I know we've touched on exercising your mind, but what would be your top three favorite techniques to maybe practice along the way? And is this something that athletes should be doing at every practice? Is it something they should be doing weekly? How often should they be doing exercises that strengthen their mind that can not necessarily prevent, but better equip them for when challenges arise?
Yeah, we talk about daily mental practice, and I borrowed this from another practitioner. But daily mental practice at the USTA looks like this three sort of stage thing. We try to build our mental training around the day, meaning that if there's structure, there's schedule, there's routine, the players will engage in their mental skills that will help them be at ease, manage their stress, manage their emotions, be confident, be committed, be goal focused, all these good things. But what we talk about is you should have a mental warm up before you do your physical warm up. As you train, you want to use your routines so that you're focused and engaged and preparing and ready to go. That could be in between rallies, that could be in between drills, sets, whatever it is. And then you want to reflect on, in a good way, your experiences that day. And that's the piece that often gets lost in this super fast digital world, that practice ends and I'm checking my phone to see what's going on X, or I know I'm old, so it could be Instagram or something else. But so that three-piece process has to be there for you to develop faster. And we've talked about this with our coaching staff and our athletes that, the race that you're really in is to learn faster than everyone else and better and more permanently. Not the race shouldn't be about points, because those again are a side effect. They're a consequence of your eventually. The real race is how much can you develop yourself? How much can you learn and hold on to that learning and push yourself every day to get better? If you can do that, then you can end up where you want to be. If it becomes about here we go again about the outcome again, then we lose sight of that. But so that mental practice. But to get to your question specifically, we like to focus the athletes on a lot on breathing, learning how to do diaphragmatic breathing. This is your natural way of obviously managing your stress, your fight or flight, and that's one piece of it. We also believe that breathing is a bridge to thinking in more clear, concise, simple ways, which is really powerful when you're performing, when you're under pressure. And so we use the breathing to become centered, to become present. So therefore, then we can start to think clearly. In our mental practice, what we ask them to do is breathe. Maybe they're doing some mindful breathing using their diaphragm. Maybe they're doing a count of like 3 in, 6 out. We even teach things like triangle breathing and box breathing, where you're adding breath holds. But then right after that, they visualize. They visualize their goals for the practice and what they're going to achieve. And they go through in their mind and see the different things that are going to happen and how they're going to have success. And even the planning, how they're going to make that. So you're bringing that to life in your mind, makes you feel committed and ready to do those things. So now we've created a more at ease, committed, ready athlete to start the day. The other piece that we emphasize a lot is gratitude and using your journal to write down your goals, but also what you're grateful for. This provides perspective. This provides, again, a more positive outlook on your day and what you have to do. As you both know, training can be very stressful, and these types of activities lower that stress level, let us feel more at ease and feel a sense of appreciation for our coaches, for our staff that's working with us, as we really push ourselves to a pretty high level. So,
Yeah, all wonderful points of to take away and practice. So thank you for sharing those. I think people may have heard it before, maybe never have, but to be a reminder and to maybe utilize that at least 3 times a week for practices is something that can really help athletes and even coaches and parents encourage this process so that they stay present and they focus on what can be good. Because I think every athlete knows those days when they're practicing phenomenally and it's going so easily and I'm not sore and I don't even have to try, it's easy. And then the majority of days is like 60-70% the other way where it's not easy. It's it's harder, but that's the whole point of the practice. And I think giving them something to focus on, the mental warm up, staying present, breathing, visualizing, and gratitude is like why am I doing this if I don't feel well? It's like, well, that way when you do feel great and everything is working really well, you're in the flow, then it's even better than it was last time you were in the flow.
yeah, that's the piece that people struggle with is when I think about is that deep learning where you're challenged, you're struggling, you're making mistakes, and it doesn't feel good. But as you're making those errors and mistakes, you're actually getting better. It doesn't feel like it, but you're actually getting better because you're figuring out what you need to do, right? And you're slowly making those adaptations. Those flow state days are feel amazing and they feel really good for your confidence, but they probably don't push learning as much as those hard training days where you have to get dirty and down in the details and figure it out. So
He's taught me that. There's
yeah,
been hard days. Yeah, he's coached me. Um, but I like the reflection piece that you brought up because at the end of the practice, I think that's really important to take the takeaways, both the good and the bad, because if you can't look at where you need to improve, you don't know where to start. But I also really like the gratitude, and you do have to build it out with some positivity because on those hard days you can just be so hard on yourself, but that's where you really do need to kind of take a step back, look at the bigger picture. What can you actually be thankful for, because at the end of the day this is sports. It's supposed to be fun, so as much as we want to challenge ourselves and get better, it's just important to keep the bigger picture in mind that this is for fun, and I enjoy this, and life could be so much worse.
yeah, that piece often forgotten, but so important. It pushes learning to the next level. The reflection allows someone to, I like to cement in the lesson learned so they're ready to use it the next day. But we also see when someone's reflecting on their experiences, they're better able to adapt a lesson and use it in a new situation, which is absolutely critical for learning if you think about it, right? Because if I can take something I learned here and I can bring it to here, it just really takes that learning to the next, it speeds it up the next level. The reflection, we try to start pretty simple, and we spend a lot of time with our players on reflecting on their practices, on their matches, and becoming more critical but also positive reflectors, using critical thinking. We often start with simple things like, okay, give us 3 good things that happened and one thing you want to improve, because we know that most human beings tend to focus on the negative experiences. They seem to get encoded in our brains more easily than positive experiences. So knowing that the athletes, they get this experience, let's focus more on the positive early on. And then as we get to know them, because I have had a few athletes over the years, pretty positive, they're big optimists, so they might start missing lessons like, oh, it'll all work out. It's like, well, you keep serving like that, it might not work out for you. And again, we're talking about a high performance level. So, and I wouldn't say that, but it's like, okay, here's 1, 2, 3 good things that happen. Now give me one thing that you want to work on, take to the next level, because you're going to want to have that going into your next tournament. So, and you figure that out as you work with people, but that reflection piece, I would say, is the lifeblood of our work, honestly. That player development, we spend a lot of time, our players on it. Our players are on the road a lot, at least half the year, if not more. So we get a lot of text, voice messages about their matches and what's going on. That's all a part of that training. So we listen to them as we read, like, are they using the language? Are they starting to use the things we're teaching? How are they attributing their success and failure from their experiences? Those are huge things as a mental coach you want to pay attention to. How are they talking about their experiences? How are they reflecting, making them more critical? Because when they start, they're going to be really general. That was good. It was bad. That's most kids, but I don't know. Let's dissect the good a little bit more. When you say good, what do you mean? And then that bad, tell me about that bad. Is it as bad as you think it is? Actually, is it just a step in learning? And again, just dissecting that. So when you do this for 3, 4, 5 years, they become much better in their own critical thinking and their reflection to be able to parse out, like, yeah, that 10 minutes wasn't very good because maybe I wasn't moving my feet, but the other hour and a half was great because I was moving my feet and I was thinking about my goals, but I let slip for those 10. So I feel good about this, but I'm going to work on this. I'm going to try and extend that ability to stay engaged longer. So those are the kinds of things that I think are extremely important. And for the coaches and players listening, if you just did that, if you set goals, process goals, performance goals, and focus on getting better every day and reflect on that, have those good reflection periods with your coaches, write in your journal. If you just did that, that's going to speed up your learning. There's a lot of other things you can do, but that's going to speed up your learning.
No, absolutely. As pole vaulters, we try to make sure we have journaling just for the grips we're on, the poles we're on, everything changes, the approaches, things that were happening, but reflecting and what is positive about the day and realizing today wasn't the best day, or maybe it was the best day. What caused all those things, and what can you still take away from the day in a positive way. So the crucial information, hopefully all coaches and players learn that. And even parents, let's talk real quick about parents. A lot of times parents will want to get their kids involved in sports. They want to say, hey, learn something new. We understand that the purpose of sports and why it's so pivotal in learning. But what are some things parents can do in a positive way for their children's growth, or no matter what the age level, but also that some things they do in the negative way, to make sure that they can know to, hey, focus and cater their encouragement, or cater their conversations with their children, even high school, even however good the athlete is, to stay in the right line to helping the athlete in the future.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's the $1 million question that everybody's trying to answer, right? And we have a lot of research on sport parents now and parenting in general, which has been very helpful. I think first and foremost is you're always putting the child in the holistic development of that child first. It's not just about the sport. When we start making it more about the sport goals, you start to see the cracks in the relationship. And so that to me is always a warning sign that there could be problems when risks are being taken for the goals. And they can be small things like, yeah, maybe they're not as focused on school. Parents aren't emphasizing it as much, or the parents move and they split. One parent's going one way and the other parent the other way in different locations for the sport. And I know that sometimes it has to happen, but these are decisions that we make that move along that continuum where the player athlete feels the very strong importance of winning, right? And performing. So we got to keep an eye on that. For a lot of I imagine the parents listening to this, if you can focus on fun and showing good sportspersonship and doing the right thing in sport, and I think that's going to go a long ways. But there's a few key things. One, you want to create unconditional love and support for your child. Just want to. It's so important. They need to know that you're there for them. Now that there for them might be that you're challenging them emotionally, like, hey, you need to give more effort when you get frustrated. You can't let your effort drop, right? You got to keep trying, and that's totally within the realm of the parents to say that kind of thing. Um, it's your child. Uh, so, but that unconditional positive regard means that I'm here for you no matter what. I love you no matter what. We're going to be good. And sometimes I'm going to give you feedback that's for your good, but that doesn't change how I feel about you. It's not going to change because you played poorly, right? And so your timing is really important. So if your child comes off a poor performance, not the best time to get on their case. Unless there's behavioral issues, then yeah, you're the parent, you decide how you want to handle it. But if they just didn't perform well, it's not really your role at that point to get on their case, unless you're the coach. And still, you got to be really careful. Let the coach be the one after the game, giving them that tough feedback, as we talked about earlier, in a good way, with empathy, with you know respect for the holistic development of the child. Be the supportive one. Be the one encouraging them, having their back, saying, "Yeah, you can do this." Now, holding them accountable again is important. So maybe later you come back and say, "Okay, maybe you did, perform poorly. So what are you going to do this week to work at that? What's your plan?" Right? And again, this is all age stage to related. If they're 6, it's much different than if they're 15. So that unconditional love and support, regard, it's there no matter. They need to feel that you are there for them, you love them. That's huge. Don't let the goals of the sport get in the way of that. Don't change things just because the outcome wasn't what you wanted. And we heard this from athletes that, I played poorly, I lost my tennis match, and so therefore we didn't go out for dinner. It's like, yeah, that seems like a small thing, but they start putting the pieces together like, oh, this is really important to my parents. So if I do poorly, I start to lose things. And now that creates stress and anxiety. It starts to affect the relationship. They start to think that the tennis performance is more important than they are. So we always tell the parents, like, hey, if you're going to go to the grandparents' house after the tournament, still do it, because you don't want to create that conditional experience for them, that conditional support. That, yeah, everything's good when you win and we'll have fun. When you lose, we're going home and, you got to just do homework, sit in your room. You don't want to do that. You want to be consistent, right? And not make it about that.
Yeah, no, that absolutely makes a ton of sense, and I think it is important, just as a reminder for parents, because when I say we're actually expecting, but
Congratulations.
thank you. But for parents to remember, it's like, hey, well, we were planning on going out to dinner, we were planning to see a friend, or in the last 10 practices or games, we've always gone out and hung out with so and so teammate afterwards. But this time it was a bad game. Let's not do that. I think that that's something that most people wouldn't even realize they're doing unless they know that they're doing it. Like, hey, bad game, no dinner, but otherwise they'd be like, oh, I just don't feel like going out to eat anymore or
For
staying with
sure.
the team. And not knowing that connection might be made even subconsciously for the parents and the athletes, that's a crucial piece of information that if it becomes a habit, can absolutely take people's joy away from the sport, because then you're, as you said, you're worried about what's not going to happen if I don't do well or if I don't do this. And that train of thinking can kind of lead people away from sports and lead people away from their passion for sports as they had, just because of a simple, conditional thing over time. So
Yeah.
that's a crucial piece of information, I think.
Yeah, and then I think also just letting the coach, your role as a
Mhm.
parent, continue to be that support, and you can give the feedback, but yeah, let the coach do their job. And I think that that's probably tough for a lot of parents to take that step back. They want to be involved and see their kid do what they know they're capable of, but I think just putting that trust into the coach.
Yeah. I feel that, with all the experiences I've had, I've been fortunate to be around great coaches, and I coach some as well. And it's really tough sometimes just to stand back and be like, hey, you're not the coach. You gave up that responsibility. You're not responsible. Just stay back. Let the coach do his or her thing.
Hmm.
Going back to the parents, though, now I remember specifically being on a call with one player. I'll never forget it because I was in Michigan at the time, and I was working at a camp or something, I think in Ann Arbor, and I had a call with a player, and we were kind of digging into why she was anxious. And one of the things she said was, when I lose and the tournament's over, we have to rush real quick. We got to make plans to how the travel, and we have to cancel the hotel, and we pack up real quick and we get out of it. And it's very stressful. And it's like we wouldn't think about that because as a parent, you're thinking about, well, I need to get back to work. I need to get home with maybe the rest of the family. The tournament's over, so we should get out of here. We got to start planning. But for that athlete, it's an emotional experience because they're just coming off of losing, and they feel that. They feel that. Oh. And then one of the things we do see, you might think it's crazy, but it happens. We have people, parents, people in the entourage of these tennis players talking about, what if you lose? Are we taking this flight? Are we taking that flight? It's like, well, what is that? Why are we talking about that? If you want to do planning in the background to be prepared for that possibility, that's fine. But why are you talking about with the athlete about that pre-match? Makes no sense. Don't put that in their brain. That's just stress. That's anxiety. So a lot of this, as you're pointing out, happens unintentionally.
Hmm.
Like parenting is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, by the way. It's hard, but it's so great. And at the same time, you're not going to be perfect. You don't have to be, because kids need to be resilient. So you're going to make some mistakes. You don't want to make the big ones, but you'll make some mistakes, and that's okay. But if there is a pattern of putting the sport first, um, making your love and support conditional, that is going to do damage. That is going to emotionally affect that young person, and it's just not right. It shouldn't happen. We as adults should be better than that. That's something that we can do to be aware of that. Now, again, some of these things happen unintentionally. We all make mistakes. It's part of it. We just got to learn from it. The intentional stuff,
Absolutely.
yeah, no. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, no, I was just agreeing. Absolutely, just being intentional with all of that. And man, we might have to do a part two. This has been a great conversation. I guess if there's a spot where our listeners might be able to find you or find more of your resources, check out a little bit more of your work, where would they be able to find you?
Yeah, so we have a podcast. It's called Compete Like a Champion, at the USTA, myself and my co-host Johnny Parks. And that's a great place where we talked about a lot of these things. We get into the sport science of high performance, and this more, I would say, more of a high performance podcast, but we do get into a lot of these things that would apply to, rec players and you know younger kids. So that's one place. Certainly, you can look us up at USTA.com. We have a number of resources. We every month we do webinars for parents. Uh, our Lunch and Learn webinars, Net Generation. So that's a place to look. And it's not just psychology. It can be on strength and conditioning or nutrition, coaching, and scheduling things. So it's pretty tennis specific, I would say. Uh, but nonetheless, I think it would help a lot of people. And then, there's just other obviously places you can go. I think if you're looking for more general resources on sports psychology, going to the Association of Applied Sports Psychology is a great place. And if you're looking for a mental coach, go to that webpage, Association of Applied Sports Psychology. You can look for consultants on that webpage. They can help you find someone who's qualified to work with your son or daughter.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. We'll definitely be sure to check that out. And we thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you. That hour went quick, but I really enjoyed
It
meeting you
really
and
did.
spending.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much and hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. If you like this episode, please subscribe and consider leaving us a review so others can find us more easily. It really helps us get the word out and it means a lot to us.
We are always looking for new stories to share here on our show. So if you know someone that would be a great guest, tell us their story by nominating them on our website at sportfuelslife.com. Thanks
Thanks
for
for listening.
listening.